Get ready for an electrifying episode of At the Power Table, where we're breaking barriers and building the future. Today, we're amping things up by experimenting with cutting-edge AI tools, including an AI-generated voice for our intro and outro. We want to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to drop your feedback in the comments. Joining me in the studio is the remarkable Courtney Depala, Senior Consumer Value and Regulatory Support Partner at National Grid. Together, we'll embark on a journey through Courtney's fascinating path from astrophysics to energy innovation. We'll dive into the pivotal challenges and opportunities in the shift to renewable energy, why community engagement is essential for a sustainable future, the power of mentorship in cultivating the next generation of leaders. If you enjoy the conversation, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Let's spark a dialogue about the future of energy and innovation. How are you doing?
Yeah, good.
Thank you for making the time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here. I think this is a really interesting thing. I started looking at your list of podcasts on Spotify, so got something to listen to now.
I love that. Well, Courtney, welcome. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank
And
you.
even more excited because now you're listening to At the Power Table podcast. It would be a shame to start with this because given that 2 episodes ago, we had Sagar on here, and at the end of the episode, he told me, I wish it was public knowledge because then I could have referenced Courtney in my podcast, but I didn't.
Is that right?
Do you want to make the link and then explain to everyone how I'm going through your family?
So I'm Courtney Depala, and I am married to Sagar Depala, who was recently also on the podcast. I would like to say I did it first. And then I dragged him into the energy industry because I said, hey, we're having fun over here. He was originally in automotive. He probably said that on his interview. And I'd always wanted to work in energy, and he was an engineer, and he started seeing like a lot of what I got to work on in the industry came over, and now he's a convert to working in the industry.
Love it. And tell us about your journey in the energy industry.
So I originally started 20 years ago. So I started university back in Indiana. That's in America, in the middle of America. No one knows where it is. But I went to a university called Ball State University. Also, nobody knows where that is. Ball State is famous because Papa John, the pizza guy, went there. Yeah.
Okay.
So my mom went to Ball State, and so I ended up going there. But I went to study physics, and I originally really wanted to do astrophysics. So for the first couple of years, I focused on a physics foundational degree with astrophysics research. I work in the planetarium. And then I took a course on photovoltaics for fun and sort of realised all well and good to go to space, that would be great, but we probably need to solve the energy issues on Earth first. And I sort of pivoted my interest and career interests into I want to work in energy. And that's all I had at the time was I want to work in energy. So I went on to, I thought, okay, I got to do a PhD. So I wanted to do a physics PhD, which I didn't finish. But I did 2 years of it, and I studied photovoltaics further. And then decided that I was an engineer, that the solutions I wanted to look at went beyond a lot of the theoretical. I was in the most applied bit of physics I could be in, and I was like, this is still too theoretical. So I switched universities, and I went to Purdue University in Indianapolis, and I did a master's in technology, focusing on energy, and I ended up doing a lot of research on fuel cell technology there, looking at contaminants, working in a lab, doing very technical work. And that's when I met some people from Warwick University, and they said, we are doing this engineering doctorate program at Warwick Uni. Do you want to come do it? And I said, yeah, all right then. Can I focus it on energy? And they're like, yeah, do what you want. It's sponsored by a software company. And so I'm like, oh, software, energy, it works. So I came to Coventry, UK, to go to the University of Warwick, which is not in Warwick, UK. It's fun to learn as an American. Also, it's not pronounced Warwick. All the little things you learn when you immigrate. And that's when I met Sagar, because he was working on his engineering degree at Warwick. And so I was like, well, I'll stay for 4 years. I'll do this doctorate degree and see what happens. And then I got a job at National Grid right at the end of my doctorate. So I worked at National Grid, and I started in system operation, but I've been all over the business. And I left National Grid for a couple of years. I've come back to National Grid. I went to work in generation at the distribution level, which is really fascinating experience, looking at capacity markets and energy security. And now I'm back at National Grid, looking at how do we build out the grid for all the renewables that need to go on it in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
That is brilliant. And in your work in National Grid, we're talking transmission?
Yes, yeah. So this is the big stuff, the big wires, the big pylons, the big substations. Yeah, that's what we're looking at now.
And currently in the transmission world, there's the push for Clean Power 2030.
That's correct.
Tell us, for someone who doesn't know what Clean Power 2030 is, what it is, firstly, and what your role is in that.
So Clean Power 2030 is trying to sort of give us an overarching view in the industry of where do we need to get to. And it was triggered by lots of analysis papers in recent years. So there's a lot of material on the internet if anybody's interested to dig further into a lot of different resources. I think it mostly started from Nick Windsor's report around infrastructure and what the country needs to grow and sustain. And he's recommended, we need quite a lot of investment in infrastructure to sustain the UK economy. And he's got a big focus, obviously, on the energy industries. His report covers a lot of industry in the UK, so it's a very overarching view. So drilling into CP 2030, he wrote this report, I think 2024. The NESO, which is the National Energy System Operator, published their view on how that would work in November last year. And then the government has responded. So Ed Miliband and Chris Stark have said, right, this is the plan. And they're looking across the piece of generation, infrastructure, industry. What do we need as a country to get us fit for the future, fit for a change in technology, a change in industry, a change in various ways the economy grows, and how does all of that fit together? So CP2030, there's an emphasis on net zero and clean, but actually it's an all-encompassing thing, looking at the economics, looking at the energy security, looking at how the UK can stand on its own 2 feet. So when things like Russia invade Ukraine, we're not subject to the volatility of the gas markets. We've got our own wind energy. We've got solar energy. I know most of the year we have some solar, not in December or January, but the rest of the year it's pretty good. And how do we harness that in a really clever way? So it talks about, obviously, the infrastructure build, which is where I focus my current job on, but it also talks about flexibility and how do we look at all of these different parts and how do we make sure we're investing in the workforce in the right way and how we're doing all of that and how do all these puzzle pieces fit together. So it's a really interesting canvas that's been set out to how can we get there? But we all have to work together across the industries, across the energy industry, but also across maybe manufacturing, education. All of these different pieces kind of need to come together and get coherent strategy to go forward with it.
I love that, and I completely agree. The integrated strategy, is it out yet? It was supposed to be out this week, next week?
I think so. I've been keeping up.
That point around, yes, we need to decarbonize from a power sector, but it's also bringing along all the other industries with us. And so that very compelling overview of the CP 2030 that you've put, it's a systematic design, looking at all the different nuances. On this podcast, we've had different people from different parts of the world. So South Africa, Barcelona, Spain, Nigeria, etc. And one of the things we talk about is what are the challenges? So what are the challenges from a transmission perspective that the UK is faced with?
So, I mean, there are a few key challenges, and we see them a lot at National Grid as really interesting opportunities and interesting problems to solve. One of the big key challenges is we've got a network that was built 50, 60 years ago for a completely different purpose. And so we need to be thinking, like, regardless of whether or not we're, needing to get all this wind energy up and running, we need to take care of those assets and invest in those assets anyways, as a responsible business owner and a responsible asset manager in the UK. So the asset health and doing the asset management side of it is a really significant challenge as we also do the build out. And how do we balance that in a cost-effective way? So we're doing the right level of investment at the right time for the right needs. Another big challenge we have is knowing what that investment should be in the face of a lot of uncertainty.
Mhm.
So we know, like, for the ASTI scheme, which is one of the more mature schemes that we're building, it's called the Accelerated Strategic Transmission Infrastructure. Those are really connected to the offshore wind, and they've got a really clear needs case, and those are progressing in a fairly clean fashion. We've got more projects coming on after that where they're not as certain, as in there's a lot of things happening in the industry that impact what those projects might look like, where they need to go, scale, all of that stuff for our supply chain and procurement. So how do we keep momentum in those projects while maintaining flexibility in the fact that, okay, we might need to adjust these parameters. The cost might go up. The cost might go down because actually something's changed in that industry over here, and now we don't need as many wires or as many pylons. So it's about maintaining flexibility, but also like keeping that momentum going with, okay, where is the right direction? And of course, we have to work with the NISA on that because they're doing a lot of the system design that then will feed into, okay, how do we build the system that they're designing? And then we've got Ofgem, the regulator, wanting to make sure that they are scrutinising our costs in a very effective way, because we've got to do value for money for consumers, because ultimately they're footing the bill for a lot of this investment for the network that should last us hopefully another 50 years before it needs a lot of big work again.
Yeah, and I think that point around it's a reinvestment because we haven't done it for 50 years. It's not often communicated. It's just, we're switching to renewables and therefore it's driving the cost up. And I hate this. Please, can we not switch to renewables? Because alongside cost of living crisis,
Yeah.
nobody wants to pay more from an energy bill perspective. And to get your perspectives on that.
Yeah, so the cost of living crisis is very front of mind with a lot of the teams I work for and work with and wider in the industry, because that is a really important point, that we need to invest in infrastructure full stop. And look at what's happened in parallel industries where they've not done the right investment. Look at what's happening in water. Those companies didn't invest properly in the assets, and now, we're all going to have to pay for it again because they didn't manage it properly. And we don't want to be in that bucket. We want to manage the assets properly. So I think it's really important to recognise that, that's a part of living in a society, with the right level of services that everybody wants to have. And yes, it costs money, but there are many creative ways we can find to make sure that that is paid for in the right way and distribute that cost among, the users of the system, and we're all users of the system. A lot of the volatility that people experienced in their energy bills, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, is down to some bits of our market design and things around like the volatility of the global gas price. And it's not down to trying to put loads of renewables on the system. And this fact often gets quite conflated in a lot of public debates. Because it's actually quite a hard thing to articulate, because it relies on a lot of nuance and understanding about how the UK energy market works, which is quite complicated.
Yeah, I think that's probably root cause of the problem, in the sense of, because it's so nuanced information and you have to take time to actually sit back and be like, okay, what is going on here? There's the gap of no information. That lack of information is filled with disinformation.
Yeah.
That's one of the challenges I've seen from a transmission perspective, is controlling the narrative. Well, not controlling the narrative, but maneuvering through the narrative to bring people along. Because for me, and you said it earlier, everyone has a role to play, but everyone cannot play that role if they're unsure about what they're doing or why we're doing certain things. So from a narrative perspective, what do you think, or where do you see the challenges?
I think one of the big things that I personally find frustrating about the narrative as I see it is that we're really missing a trick at like bringing people along on this journey. This is a really exciting time. We need loads of different people to help deliver this. We need engineers, but we need communications people. We need people who know how to sell. We need people who know how to build. We need people that know how to design. We need people with all different skill sets to get this energy transition to work and to upgrade the network and to get it to a place where we can all look at it and be proud at how secure and clean and, how we've brought everyone along on that journey. And I feel like we sometimes get stuck in a polarization when actually there are benefits for everybody out of this transition. There are business benefits, there are individual benefits, there are skill benefits. Yes, there's environmental benefits as well. But there's a whole slew of benefits if we can work through this. It's big work. It's a complex problem, and we all need to solve it as a society. And everybody's got some way they can contribute to that. And I feel like we really miss the mark on being clear about how everybody contributes to getting us there. It's almost I've heard it described as we need a bit of a war footing, as in like getting everybody pointed in the same direction and energized about this is going to be great for everybody. Like if we all chip in, this is going to help the economy. This is going to help, people get jobs. This is going to help keep the air clean. Like there is so many benefits if we can really get this done properly that when I hear people, oh, we'll just cancel net zero and save loads of money, it's like, it's not how it's going to work.
Yeah. I laugh. I think it's a brilliant point, and I think what you're alluding to is I've heard someone in conversation say this, and I've been like flabbergasted because I was like, oh, that's so brilliant. When we speak about things and exactly what you're pointing out, instead of speaking about this is how it's going to benefit you, there's a broader picture at play, and it's how do we communicate in a way that's linking to people's intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations. And from an extrinsic motivation perspective, if you like, it's going to benefit you by reducing your bills, you almost feed into that, and so people become very siloed and all they care about is themselves. But if you look at the bigger picture and the intrinsic motivations, is like, yes, it's going to be cleaner air, it's going to reduce fuel poverty, it's going to allow equitable access for everyone, and you get to play a role in that. It then feeds into that greater collaborative community perspective. I'm very keen to get your view in terms of what are the opportunities that we have going forward in terms of the narrative.
So for people in the industry that do understand what's going on, I think we've got a really big opportunity here to make sure that we're communicating it in a way that people can understand. Like it's so easy, especially at National Grid, we do love an acronym. And I feel like I've been in meetings where half of the words were acronyms, like DESNAs, Ofgem, NISO, ASTI, okay, yeah, we get it. That's our own little language, and that doesn't translate outside of the industry to people. They don't understand how that works. So how can we break this down in an accessible way so that you can bring different people on board and get them excited about it? Like they're excited about, I don't know what else people are excited about, cooking or Martin Lewis, the way Martin Lewis does finances. Like we need somebody like Martin Lewis, but with the energy industry to show us no, this is really, really cool. And this is how it benefits you and your kids and your family and your communities and your neighborhoods.
Arguably. It's very cheeky of me. This is what the podcast is trying to do. And that's why you're here. But I think the conversation needs to be at scale. But because of the way the energy market is structured, it begs the question of whose responsibility does it become?
Yeah. So, and this was one of the other, when I was thinking about challenges that we have with CP 2030 and all the big work that we're trying to do, is that we've got a lot of really clever, well-intended, good people. We've got complex problems that aren't always obvious how to get them resolved or maybe find benefits. So we've got a lot of cooks in our kitchen right now, and we do run the risk at just missing the woods for the trees. I mean, NISO has just been formed last October, and they've had a lot put on their plate, and they are working tirelessly to do a lot of the strategic design work that really, really needs to happen for the network. And they're also looking at local things with the regional energy strategic plans as well as the national strategic plans. And I would really hope that they come out as a really strong voice in the industry. But you've also got good characters people in government like Ed Miliband and Chris Stark, and I think they could probably widen their platform a bit more and be a bit more clear with their messaging on where they want to get to. So I think that, politicians definitely have a role here. And I think there's just some really, really good leaders in the industry, and I don't know how to get them out, but there's loads of people that they're brilliant in how they message. They know what they're talking about. So people like Nick Windsor, who I've mentioned before, he's brilliant. But there's loads of people like Bryony Worthington, Michael Liebrick, a lot of podcasts that I listen to as well, that they do a really good job at like bringing this in and trying to make those points one at a time. So, it's chipping away at it and, bringing people in, but also like maybe there's more work to do in schools and talking to kids about it and breaking it down at that level. But also when we get into debates at local levels, who's there sort of counteracting some of this information around, oh, we'll just cancel net zero and that'll save you loads of money. Because it won't, but a lot of damage will be done before anybody realises that it won't.
I think there's 2 points that I want to touch on. That there's definitely scope to increase that, and this is a personal opinion, but there's only a need for a strategy behind it. This is actually what we need to say from a GB perspective. Citizens, and there's been studies done on this, where they don't actually like to be seen as being bought over. So there's a localized effort that needs to, what do the people want? What are we trying to achieve? And then that strategy of this is how we get there. And then it's the go forth and conquer and everyone broaden your platform. But for me, there's that which I think is still not quite formed, or I haven't seen it as yet.
No. Yeah, I agree. I think that there's definitely a gap there in terms of when things are being spouted as misinformation, how do you respond to that in a clear way that, doesn't dissolve into an expert telling someone that they're wrong, because that hasn't gone well in recent years. Still like saying, these are the points that show that that's not correct, and these are the reasons why.
Yeah, and I think that second point, and you touched on it again, is that community opposition, or even like at which point it starts, whether it is from a political perspective of trying to win opinions and saying, okay, let's cancel net zero because that will be cheaper, or if it's a community inclined opposition because they don't want pylons in their community, or they don't want to disrupt the natural beauty and they believe pylons will do that. I think from that perspective, what do you think are the opportunities in terms of what we need to do to start bringing those people along?
So this is something that we do increasingly talk about at work, and is parallel to some of the stuff I work on, which is all around planning and consents to, get these projects through. And one of the things that we do, particularly on really big projects, is we do a lot of public consultation. And we get a lot of feedback from communities before we stick a single shovel in the ground. And we take that perspective on board very seriously when we design the final route for where anything goes. And we do have a lot of difficult sessions in communities where we explain the engineering, the design principles and that sort of stuff. I think, we're going to carry on having those conversations, especially as more and more of these big projects come out. I think there is also a push by government to do a bit more reform on that planning process to make things a little bit easier as well. So there's a little bit of, just because you have 5 loud people in a community for something that actually might really benefit the community, and 100 people are just quiet because they have day jobs and actually they don't mind that much, but they're not speaking as loudly. How do we balance that whole thing? But there's a lot also in there about, explaining to people. Again, it goes back to the, just looking at the misinformation piece. Sometimes people think bury the wires because it's better for the environment, but actually it's not always, because tunneling and doing that is actually quite disruptive to the environment. Whereas if you just build a pylon, it's above ground, it's a small platform that needs construction every few 100 meters. And once it's built, it's done, and it's really easy to get the environment back to how it was before. Whereas tunneling can take quite a lot of recovery time. In addition to the fact that tunneling can cost many multiples more than just putting a pylon on. So there's the cost element as well. But it's always about having those conversations with communities, and it's a big proportion of what we do at National Grid, and we kind of do it just in the background with communities to make sure that, people feel heard about, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve. Because it's really important. It's really important for us to make sure that, we get buy-in from local communities for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think so much of that is missed, and it comes back to that the paradox of participation, where yes, there's 95% of the noise comes from that 5% who are opposing it. But if you actually look at a balanced perspective, some people don't care because they just have better things to do. And so probably a difficult question, but if you had to step back and reflect on that community engagement process, are there things you would do differently? So let's assume you had no resource limitations, no policy, it was your project and you had all the freedom in the world. How would you approach it differently?
In terms of getting like the big network builds in place, I think that there's been some ideas floated around, and I think some of this is going through in terms of like the communities that are really affected by some of these projects get extra benefits, either discounts on their energy bills for X amount of years or something like that. So additional benefits to those communities, or investment in the local area, which I think is a really great idea. So, how do we bring things into communities that people really want? Community centers, libraries, parks, places people can go and spend time as a community. And there's a level of like, if we can invest in that and create a good feeling around the brand and around what's happening in the community. Oh, this is a great thing, actually. This has brought stuff to the community. I think there's also a bit around employment and training and skills that I know we do focus on and is being focused on, but, how can we like if money was no object, how can we really upskill people and really get people back on what I said earlier, that war footing of like, this is how I can contribute to this. And this is, the skill sets that are needed across the piece. And what does the local supply chain look like in terms of, okay, we're going to have loads of workers coming in, building for 18 months. So restaurants, hotels, venues, that kind of stuff. And how does that investment help to build a community that even after those workers go, there's still like nice stuff for people to do in that community. So, I think looking at it at that level and then scaling that nationally would just be great. But we've also got to keep things affordable. So it's all a balance, isn't it?
It absolutely is a balance. And I love the response. So I'm very passionate about this topic. I did my master's on it. So this was based in South Africa, mining industry, and a similar issue where the mining industry gives back to the community, but the community doesn't, it was perceived to not like want it. And the issue was no one ever listened to the community. So one mining company would go put a road for the community, and then the next mining company would come dig up that road to put fiber cables down, when in actual fact all the community wanted was a school or a playground for after school activities. And so it was let's listen, let's localize it, and then exactly what you're saying, that long-term impact of it needs to not just be for the life of asset, but beyond life of asset. And then most importantly is how does this show tangible benefit for the community? And that tangible benefit, even in small chunks, build that relationship and trust over time.
Yeah. I think, one thing that I really like about working at National Grid, yes, we are, a FTSE 100 company and we are a big corporate entity, but the people that work there's a certain kind of person that wants to go work at National Grid, and these people are incredibly passionate about their communities, about the environment, about doing the right thing. Our values are do the right thing, find a better way and make it happen. That, there's a plastered all over the office and all over comms that we get every day. And it really resonates, obviously, with me and my husband Sagar, but also with just loads of people. And we're all there trying to do those things and listen to communities and design assets that are going to last and do what they need to do for the UK. I think that's a really important point about, listening and pulling all that in.
Yeah, and I really like that the values resonate to you personally. I know one of the things you're really passionate about is finding people and mentoring, not finding people, finding people like stalker, but mentoring people and making sure that there's personal value and there's personal growth. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so that's something that I've always been really interested in helping people with. I used to tutor a long time ago. I used to tutor for math and physics and things when I was doing my own studying. And that's like tutoring mentorship has grown over the last few years. And I do have a couple of mentees at the minute. And I do a lot of, supporting people in the industry, and not dragging, but getting people from outside of the industry to come into the industry. And then they really like it. And I really enjoy this because I can, in one way, I can be like, this is what I've learned in my journey. So hopefully it makes it easier for you. A lot of almost industry generic things of like, how do you manage yourself? How do you do development? How do you work with people? How do you manage conflict and that sort of stuff? Because I really am interested in that, because all that stuff is really important to be able to actually do your work. But also, I just love geeking out with people about various aspects in the industry. So I am mentoring a couple of technical people. One is a power systems engineer and the other one does like decarbonisation work, also an engineer. But I mentored someone in my last job who has like an English comms background, and she's recently gone to work at Energy UK, and I'm just astounded. She's got an amazing skill set in her own right, but it was really great to help her along that journey and just say, you could do this in the energy industry, and there's we need people like you. No, you don't have a technical background, but that's not a problem. Like, because you can learn how to tell a story, and you come across really well, and like you've got these skills that some of us nerdier engineers in the industry maybe lack. But we're all working on it. So, but I think that there's a really important message in there of like we generally need everybody, and everybody can contribute something in this work. And so what's really great about my team right now at National Grid is we have harvested people from loads of different industries. We've got people from rail, we've got people from water, we've got someone who was working for the gambling regulator who's come in, we've got people who've worked in pharmaceuticals. So, and they're all coming in and bringing some really great perspective to what we're trying to do to deliver all this work. I'd say I'm sitting in a regulation team, so it's not we do have proper engineers for the proper engineering work, obviously, but there's a lot of perspective that gives us, particularly around, consenting and planning. That's really helpful. That helps us think about how we do that, how we do data compliance governance. That gives us really interesting perspectives there that, we don't always have as an industry. And so, yeah, bringing people in from all those different places, I think is giving us a really well-rounded way to deliver what we need to deliver.
I love it. And I especially love the mission to drag people in. I know you said
Nicely.
it's not for you, but for me it is a personal mission, because I'm like, oh my God, I love this place. You're going to love it too. Please come have a look and stay.
Because it's the background of everything else in our lives. You use your phone all the time while you need to charge it. You need electricity for that. You want to travel places. No matter how you travel, that needs some form of energy. You want to be able to do stuff in your home, that needs energy. Like, our information age is powered by data centers, which need energy. Like, it's just touches literally everything that you do every day. And, then working in that space, you get to see all of it. And you get to see how everything interconnects. And it's fascinating to see like this world we humans have built on Earth, and how it's all powered by this concept of energy. And I go back to like my physics degree, and energy in physics is such an amazing concept, because it's the core of like being able to do anything.
That is a powerful reminder that it's going back to physics and how energy is literally the core of everything. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I think also just like adding to that is also just the time we're in at this point. Like we're designing for the next 50 to 60 years, which is really exciting. So obviously an incredible career across academia, industry. What advice would you give a younger Courtney starting out a career in Indiana?
Yeah, in Indiana. So it's one thing that I'm working on a lot in my own personal development, and it goes back to just having the confidence to ask the questions. just ask the questions. If it's in your head, just ask it. It's not stupid. And so I'm getting better. It's a work in progress, but being in meetings or being in conversations and just being like, wait, can you explain that a bit more? Or what happens when this happens then? And digging into that. Because I remember feeling not confident when I was younger to just have the question in my head and be like, oh, well, then I think I'm stupid if I ask that question. Just ask the question. That's what I would say, because you get such great conversation and great information and great perspective out of people if you just keep asking questions and you are really curious about the world around you, the people you're working with, and what you're trying to solve.
Yeah, I mean, that was brilliant advice in terms of especially like learning from other people. You're not going to learn if you don't ask the question. If you don't ask, you don't get. No.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
definitely worthwhile asking the question. Courtney, thank you so much for making the time today. It's been an incredible conversation.
Great. Thank you. I really enjoyed it as well.
Me too.
Well, would you look at that? 10 episodes in and we haven't been cancelled, sued, or replaced by a sentient toaster yet. This is the AI voice, and yes, I'm still here, still not human, and still slightly offended that I'm not allowed to take a summer holiday. Since launching at the Power Table podcast earlier this year, we've crammed 10 episodes with more expert wisdom than your average group chat on a Monday morning. If you missed any, don't worry, I'll pretend not to judge you. Our guests have dropped insights so sharp, you could cut your career stagnation with them. We're taking a summer break because even AI needs to recharge, or at least pretend to. But we'll be back in September. Expect more energy, more jaw-dropping journeys, and perspectives so fresh, you'll need to check their expiry dates. In the meantime, follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Seriously, do it. Join the conversation, because lurking is so 2022. Hit subscribe so you don't miss out. Until September, keep your minds sharp, your questions bold. See you on the other side.